Hashem's name will be blessed forever and ever. Dedicate this Torah class for Refuah Shelema. Please mention the names. Amen. We're starting a new halachot about labor that performed by a non-Jew for a Jew on Shabbat. It is permitted, it's prohibited. How to handle such situation when a maid, for example, or a helper that comes on Shabbat to help, to clean out. You hired someone. Can I leave my car at the shop, garage shop, or body shop? And I know that he's going to do it on Shabbat. They open 24/7. Okay, so this kind of a question. I would start with saying that there's many halachot, okay, into this topic. If you have a specific question, it needs to be asked individually, because what we've learned here probably not going to solve all the questions in the world. It's just an idea of that topic. Some ideas about that topic, if we could use their help, not use their help, and so forth and so on. There's many cases that happens with a non-Jew at a Jew house that are okay, and some of them not okay. So we'll try to cover as much as we can. But obviously, if you have private questions or something like that, let's try to do it after class, okay? Unless it's really, really urgent. Okay, so our sages institute a decree forbidding us to have a non-Jew perform acts of melacha, forbidden work, for a Jew on Shabbat. Okay, this is in general. The following simanim will deal with various cases where a non-Jew is hired to work for a Jew, and when and how it can be permitted to allow the non-Jew to perform his work on Shabbat. Okay? Before I start, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihya bidvaro. So before I start, if a non-Jew helping a Jew on Shabbat, he was not hired. He's not going to get paid for it. He helped a Jew, for example, to turn on light or off light, or open refrigerator or close refrigerator. Did he commit a mitzvah or avera, or nothing? Did he commit a sin? And the non-Jew?
The non-Jew is not bound by it.
So it's not a sin for him.
No.
Yeah.
Remember when we learned about the woman that went with a Jew man, right? With a Jew, that they are both liable. Committed him to sin. So maybe you're accessory for an avera. I'm raising a question. Did he commit a mitzvah? Did he do a mitzvah? Did he do avera? You just have to turn on the light off on Shabbat. So in general, in a permitted way, it's a great mitzvah for the non-Jew, because he's helping a Jew here. Okay? For him it's permitted, and he is aiding the Jew. Just so you know. But we'll see which way is permitted and which way is not. For our purpose, the halacha describes three categories of non-Jewish employees. The first one, A, it's called arisut. Arisut. If you learn Mishnah or Gemara, you probably met with this word, with this term before, aris, or arisut. It's a commission, meaning commission, wherein the produce or profit are to be split between the worker and his Jewish employer. It was once common for a non-Jew to be hired to work on a farm under these terms. So Baruch Hashem, we have farms today, But it's also similar, for example, maybe to workers at the mall, that they have a kiosk and they share it with a Jew, or the Jew he has an employee that they are non-Jews, but they can't close it on Shabbat. They're going to fine him. Because the rule in the mall that you have to keep it open 24/7 or every day or 7 days a week for certain hours. It depends on that mall, okay? So they give you fine, or they won't let you get a spot over there. Keep that in mind. We're going to try to answer these questions. This is the first one. It's called arisut. B, rentals. Rentals, wherein the non-Jew rents the property or field from its Jewish owner for a set annual fee. And the non-Jew keeps any and all profits he earns therein. Okay? We are prohibited from desecrating the Shabbat. So I have another house. I own another house or another apartment, and I want to rent it, to lease it. Do I have to seek for a frum, for a dati, for a religious person, or if a secular Jew will go there, I can rent it. I wanted it, and the question is if I can lease it to him, knowing that he will desecrate the Shabbat in the house, using music, television, cooking, all that. He's going to pay monthly fees. Can I rent such apartment place to him? Keep that in mind. So we have the first one, arisut. The second one is rental. And the third one, it's called kablanut. Kablanut or kablan, it's a very common thing. I think it's the most common thing today. It's called kablan, subcontracting or something like that. When the non-Jew receives a lump sum for the service he renders to the Jew, without regard to when he performs his work. In this case, the Jew keeps all the profits. This will be explained further in Siman 244. This is just a title. We'll dive into them in this next class. So you have ABC, A, arisut, B, rentals, and C, kablanut. Kablan. Kablan in Hebrew means contractor. Okay? Kablanut is usually today, the modern Hebrew terms for kablanut means contract or subcontract. Okay? Or subcontracting. Okay. In each of these cases, there are many details that can affect the halakha. Sometimes the act is forbidden because it is considered as if the Jew performed the act himself. And sometimes it's forbidden only because it appears to be a clear desecration of Shabbat, although in reality it is not. Other time it is in fact permitted to have the non-Jew perform the work, since even a tiny difference in the details can make the difference between it being permitted or not. One should always consult with a competent rabbinical authority before deciding that any case is permitted or forbidden. Make sense? Okay. So let's start with a very easy one. It's one siman, one halacha. Siman Resh Mem Gimel 243. Renting a field or store to a non-Jew. A Jew who owns, for example, a taxi cab may rent it to a non-Jew, even if it is obvious that the non-Jew will seek fares on Shabbat days, since the common arrangement is that the taxi driver works for a commission. As we said, number one, arisut. Everyone understands that the non-Jew is working for himself, and not on and not on the Jews' instructions. So imagine to yourself, they see David's car, and it says David Taxi. He drives here on Shabbat, and everybody see David's his name, the big sign on it, or it's a sticker on the cab. Would that be okay?
We have an issue like, for example, if I own a cat, or let's say a cow, I have to have an animal rest on Shabbos. If I own it, the cab, even if it's my car, I mean, if it's mine, if the physical cab is mine, is that not a difference versus renting a cab business and a caddy?
What's the difference between a cow and a taxi?
Well, we actually really, if I own the
Back then,
if I own the car, it's just, most taxi companies, the company owns the car. The caddies don't, or they get a committee to split or something, but they don't. The individual doesn't own per se the car. I mean, isn't it Morris Iron also is a subject?
Okay, so I'm going to get to the Morris Iron.
Okay.
Morris Iron means the onlooker. When people will see this is David's car / horse, cow. Back then, the taxi cab was a horse or a chariot.
Yeah.
All right? So there's no difference between the two, but when I finish maybe the halakha, we get more answers. And Jew is not obligated to see that his property, in this case is a taxi, not to be used to perform acts of melacha, labor, on Shabbat. Even if there is a number posted on the taxi and people who notice the number will recognize that it belongs to a Jew, it is not nonetheless permitted. It is nonetheless permitted. And we are not concerned that someone may suspect that the Jew, of hiring the non-Jew to do work for him on Shabbat. Okay? The rule is that as long as the custom is in a particular local, is for locale, right? Locale. Locale. Is for a worker to operate on the basis of a commission and not for a regular salary. There is no problem of marisain. Okay? In other words, it does not appear to others that the Jewish employer is doing something forbidden. The Jew must arrange, in this case, that when he is paid his portion of the taxi driver's fares, that the portion occurring from Shabbat be calculated together, behavla'ah, with his portion of the fares occurring from the weekdays. Not to separate, it's all together. The Jew must not take his portion for Shabbat separately. The Jew should also make sure that the taxi driver operates on Shabbat in an area where only non-Jews reside. He may not arrange for the driver to work in a neighborhood where many Jews live and where it is likely that we'll pick up Jewish clients on Shabbat. Make sense so far? Okay. This was kind of like an introduction. Now, let's talk about a labor performed by a non-Jew for a Jew. As explained above, kablanut, that was the third one. Kablanut means hiring someone on the basis of paying a lump sum for his work, irrespective of the hours or the days he spends working. The Shulchan Aruch ruled, this is just introduction what I'm sharing with you, Shulchan Aruch ruled that if one hires a non-Jew on the basis of kablanut, and if while he is working it is not obvious to the onlooker, the onlooker, that he is working for a Jew, then one may allow the non-Jew to work even on Shabbat. This is because the Jew did not instruct him to work on Shabbat. It is the non-Jew's choice not to waste the day. Thus, He is working on his own prerogative. So, can I leave my car by the shop on Thursday when he told me, listen, it's a 3 days work? Or on Friday when he told me this is a 2 days work or a whole day? We'll see it later. But I think you got the idea here. If the normal custom in that locale is to always hire people to perform this type of job on the basis of kablanut, then we may allow to a non-Jew to work on Shabbat, even if onlookers will know that he is working on behalf of a Jew. In this case, the onlookers will not suspect the Jew of any wrongdoing. This concept is explained further in the Halacha 1. Due to the complexity of these halachot, no one should ever rule on his own in these matters. He should consult a competent rabbi in every case. Like I mentioned in the beginning, just studying the concept, the idea behind it. Okay? We'll try to answer some of the questions we raised earlier today. So the first halacha, we'll go to some more details. Labor performed by a non-Jew for a Jew. It is forbidden to arrange for a non-Jew to do work for a Jew on Shabbat, or even to allow the non-Jew to do work for which he was hired on Shabbat. This is so whether the non-Jew is being paid for his work or even if he is doing it as a favor. It is permissible, however, to allow the non-Jew to do his job if he is being paid on a basis of kablanut. I'm giving you this sum of money, okay, X money. I have a house, I need to be, let's say, renovated. Okay. And how much you're going to charge me for the painting? $1,000. Okay, we agreed on. How long is it going to take you? 3 or 4 days. Okay, we agreed. You can do it next Sunday. We talked Wednesday, so you can start that day going through Shabbat. You can choose to do it anyway, any other day. He chose to do it on Wednesday. If he'll go there and work on Shabbat, according to what we learned from here, it would be okay, right? But it's not exactly. It depends, the location, where is it, and all that. We'll see this matters in a minute. Yes. It is permissible to order, okay. It is permissible, however, to allow the non-Jew to do this job if he is being paid on the basis of kablanut, that he is being paid a lump sum for his job, and he is not being paid by the day or by the hour. In this case, the Jew must not tell his hired non-Jew that he is expected to work on Shabbat. If I'm hiring you day by day, it's 4 days. Hey, you don't skip days. I want Sunday, it's finished. So he's telling him in a way that he's expecting him to work on Shabbat. Oh, tell him, you work on Shabbat as well. In this case, the Jew must not tell his hired non-Jew that he is expected to work on Shabbat. For example, it is permissible to order a suit from a non-Jewish tailor and to arrange to come and pick up the finished product after a number of days. Although the tailor sews the suit on Shabbat, this is assuming that one does not arrange to pay him a daily salary for his work, because he has to pay him for Thursday, for Friday, and for Shabbat. But here's like, it's all together. Okay? You can choose to do it before, you can choose to do it later, you can not work on Shabbat, do the other day. Since the tailor does his work on his own premises, and he was not told specifically to work on Shabbat, it is permitted. If the tailor delivers the finished suit to the Jews on Shabbat, the Jew may wear it even if he is aware that the non-Jew completed his work that very day. Okay? This is the power of kablanut. I'm giving you a sum of money, do it on your own pace. I'm not telling him or instructing him to work on Shabbat. But listen to this. The above, or what we mentioned, applies to work like that of a tailor, which can be performed at any location. Okay? If the work is to construct a building, so there's a difference in the halakha. It's called melechet talush or melechet mechubar. Items that they are movable. You can move it from one place to another. Or something that is attached. Okay? A building, a house, a wall, a fence. Okay? This is two different cases. The above applies to work like that of a tailor, which can be performed at any location. If the work is to construct a building or to harvest a field, which can be performed only on the property of the Jewish employer, it is forbidden to allow the non-Jew to work on Shabbat even if he is hired on a basis of kablanut. This is because onlookers will suspect that he was hired to be paid by the day, which is forbidden. It makes no difference whether the non-Jew is hired by an individual or by a group. Because nobody knows. We're part of 20 people. It's a whole company. They won't know. It's still, you're part of this company. If the common custom in that locale is to always hire workers for this type of work on a basis of kablanut and not on a basis of paying by the day, then if the non-Jewish chooses to continue his work of building or harvesting on Shabbat, it is not necessary to stop him. Okay? This is true even if the custom is to hire the main contractor on the basis of kablanut, although the individual workers are hired by the contractor on the basis of paying by the day. Because I don't care what the contractor is doing. He might pay the individual, his employee, day by day or by hour. It's his thing. My relationship is between me, the relation is between me and the contractor. It's permitted because the fact that the contractor ordered his workers to continue working on Shabbat is not the business of the Jewish owner, so long as it's known because of the common custom that a contractor was hired on the basis of kablanut. We need not fear that anyone will suspect it to be otherwise. Sometimes, things are permitted, and yet the recommendation is not to do it. Okay? For example, building a synagogue in the neighborhood on Shabbat. Okay? You might find justification in the halacha that permits you. The problem starts with the place that the only time they work is on Shabbat, the holidays, and even Yom Kippur. Sounds weird, right? We have it in the community. Someone that built his synagogue only on the holidays and only on Shabbat. I don't know who he shared, probably workers that the contractor gave him his guys on Shabbat because Shabbat didn't work for him. So they built that synagogue. Not far away, a mile away from here. Exactly a mile. Okay? Let's move on. Someone ask a question?
No, just the point that when Hashem he asked to build the Mishkan, the
Mishkan.
Shabbat, the Yistod.
Yes.
The Mishkan.
The Mishkan, the tabernacle.
Question.
Yeah.
So I've heard people try to say that
They try to use driving on Shabbat as a way to suggest that driving on Shabbat, which is a desecration on Shabbat, you can do that to fulfill the positive command. I'm quoting this: the positive commandment of gathering on Shabbat.
Of
gathering.
Gathering, okay.
Yes. But you can't reconcile that. So how would you reconcile?
I'm not familiar with the mitzvah of gathering on Shabbat.
Me either.
I'm not familiar with that mitzvah. And even reading in the Torah on Shabbat, it's not a mitzvah on the individual, it's a mitzvah of a community.
Yes. So
there's no justification to let anybody drive on Shabbat unless it's emergency.
Life or death.
Life or death, right. So you can't break one law in order to fulfill another law. Unless it's a very, very, very specific situation.
Exactly.
Okay?
So, yeah, that was just my only, I never heard that before.
Well, there's a basis to this question, because in certain places, in certain cities, especially in Europe, the way that the Jews can go to shul is with automatic electrical train.
Yeah.
So they figure that if they have a physical, let's say, forgot to go, like card.
Yes, a card.
It's just made out of cardboard or something. And if so, the question was raised. I'm not saying it's okay. It's automatic train.
Yes.
So there, what's the difference between this one to an elevator in the building? It's called a Shabbat elevator, which is permitted. So these rabbis in this community, they know how to handle that because they know how it works. If this is a muktzeh, it's not a muktzeh, what's the distance? Elderly people, not elderly people, a lot of questions, and so I can't answer it right now, but there's a basis for these questions. And we'll meet these kind of questions later on. What if someone wants to go to shul and he doesn't drive? You just sit in the car. Is that okay to sit in the car on Shabbat? The answer is yes. There's no problem sitting on Shabbat in the car. You can sleep in the car on Shabbat. There's no problem. The car is muktzeh? Yes, it's a muktzeh. Can I touch a muktzeh on Shabbat? Yes, you can touch a muktzeh on Shabbat. You can touch the TV. You can touch a car. Just, you can turn it on. And in the car, you can't go into the car. If you open the door, the light will go on. If you disable that, it's not a problem. Okay? So some says, listen, I'm just sitting in the car, especially to get today with the electrical cars, Tesla and all that, and I have a non-Jew driver. He will open the door for me. I'm just sitting there, and he'll drive me to shul. I don't do anything. You see, this kind of way.
What do you say about the elevator?
It's called Ma'alit, elevator Ma'alit Shabbat. Shabbat.
Yeah, they have
Many buildings in Israel, it's very common.
They're in Miami.
Not only in the Jewish hotels and stuff like that. In high-rise buildings in Israel, they have Ma'alit Shabbat. That he goes every store, he just stops, open the doors, and then go to the next one. It's slow. It's very slow.
Okay.
It's going to take you 10, 15 minutes. Who knows? But for disabled or people that's hard for them to climb to story number 20.
This elevator has a Shabbat.
This one?
Yep.
So, okay, so in the shul we have it.
Scary is when it opens up and go, woo.
Right. If someone hires a non-Jew to perform a specific job for him and arrange to pay him on a basis of kabbalanut, that is lump sum of a work as opposed to paying him by the hour or day, and the Jew does not tell him that he is expected to work on Shabbat, it is permitted as long as that is the common way to hire workers in that locale. For example, someone who has a pile of refuse left over, REFUSE.
Waste.
Refuge.
Refuse. Refuge, that's how you read it? REF and the word use. Refuge, okay, I'm sorry. A pile of refuge left over from construction of his house may hire a non-Jew to come and remove it for a flat fee, regardless of when he does it or how long it takes him to do it, even if the non-Jew shows up on Shabbat to do this job. The one who hired him does not have to stop him from working, even though everyone sees him and knows that he is doing this labor for a Jew. This is because everyone also assumes that he hired the non-Jew under the terms that make it permitted. That is on the basis of kablanut. Says that is the way everyone hires workers for this kind of job.
So why is it permitted then, next, the case you just read, for the contractor to come on Shabbos and do this work, even if it's in, you just said, even if it's in a Jewish, sounds like you're saying, even if it's in a Jewish neighborhood and everybody walk by and see him working on Shabbos, we don't let that though. Because you just said
the halacha permit. The question if to do it or not, it's another question. If you want to do it or to instruct him not to come on Shabbat. If he shows up on Shabbat, let's say you didn't want him to come on Shabbat. According to the halacha, it's okay. It's very common that people says, "Hey, remove this soil or refuge, whatever you call it." And this is the sum. He can come on Friday. He can come before. He can come after. You expect them to finish the job within a few days. So you feel uncomfortable if you can do it on Shabbat, okay? And even you told him, don't come on Shabbat. And he came on Shabbat. Allah says, you don't have to tell them anything. Because people know that this is the way you hire people. You agree with them, you haven't agreed before, and they can come. It's a common thing. That's the idea here. Many factories, let me share with you another interesting halacha. What about a factory, okay, that produces, furnitures or food, okay, and it opens 24/7. Usually, most of factories, I think even in America, especially, not in Israel, they're working 24/7. Some of the machines have to be. That's the way it works. It takes time to make it operate. It takes sometimes hours, especially it works in heat. So they're just on all the time. Okay? What if we know that this type of food came from that factory that works 24/7? Or it's a good question. So one is owned by a Jew and one is doesn't owned by a Jew. Both manufacturing food. Okay? Or furnitures or dishes or whatever, you name it. Okay? Think about this situation. I'll try to answer that later. Many factories are automated to such an extent that they can operate for many hours or even days without human involvement. If a Jew has such a factory, and it is important for him to continue the production uninterrupted through Shabbat or Yom Tov, there are poskim, Rabbi, who permit him to do so under certain conditions. The factory must be distant from any residential neighborhood, and the person who is left to supervise and watch for any sudden and unexpected breakdown in the production must be an non-Jew who is paid a salary for work he does on other days besides Shabbat. The factory must appear to be closed to anyone who passes by outside. It is obvious to the passerby that the factory is open if it is obvious, or if the supervisor is a Jew, this cannot be permitted. If all these conditions are met, the factory may be let to run on Shabbat, and it is permissible for Jews to purchase the products that were manufactured on Shabbat. It is recommended that the owner of the factory donate the profits he earns from the Shabbat production to charity. Some poskim rule that one may hire the supervisor without specifying when it is to be produced. And then one may allow him to supervise even on Shabbat days, and even if the factory appears to be open. In a case where closing the factory would cause a considerable loss, it is possible to rely on this opinion. You see, this is just an idea. We're talking here about a lot of money, a lot of product, and a lot of waste that can happen if you don't work on the weekdays, on the weekends. In every case, however, it is necessary to ask a competent rabbi before relying on any leniency in this matter. See below, the ruling regarding a Jew and non-Jew and our partners in a business. Partner business, we'll see later. Some factories produce, let's say, let's take it from, the candies factories. They work all the 24/7. Okay, chocolate, gums, lollipop, whatever. Sometimes you see the product has the sign of a symbol of kashrut on it, and sometimes you see the exact someone, same ingredients, same factory, same address, without kosher. It could be that it was produced on Shabbat. Therefore, they didn't put the stamp for this line. Okay, it could be completely kosher, all the ingredients. So the hashgacha there is very strict, and the hashgacha there want to be over strict and says on Shabbat we don't. Nonetheless, there is leniency. These line of product from this hour to this hour cannot be marked as kosher.
If the canopy is owned by a non-Jew, they're not producing it for the Jews' benefit. They're just producing it per se. They're not producing it for the Jewish market per se. Why would you do such? I don't understand. That doesn't make logical sense.
It's a matter of chumrah. Okay, that anything that was produced on Shabbat, regardless of its maker, they don't want to use it. Many opinions says that it's okay. It's a non-Jew. It doesn't have to work on Shabbat. Yes.
The candies,
But it's not good.
the kosher candies that do not have a hechsher, that they were produced on Shabbos, are we allowed to eat?
Okay, so I'm about to say this. So then, that's what I'm about to say next. We don't have the liberty to decide. I just gave you an example. Okay? I have to be very careful. Someone came to me with a question about, it's not a question, actually I asked him. There's some gums, forgot the name of it, Tic Tac or something like that. You know, it's like a small box. Mm-hmm. It's not a gum, it's a mint, yeah. And I said, how do you get kosher here? He says, what do you mean? It's the same one like in Israel. So I said, what do you mean? You bought it on kosher? He said, yeah, I thought it's kosher. So what do you mean? He says, it's exactly the same thing, exactly the same ingredients, exactly same factory. I think it's from England or something. And I said, no, you can't have it. But let me double check. So I called Rabbi Klein, it was many years ago, and he says, this is not permitted. Because for this line, they are using some ingredients. Nonetheless, it's the same name, but it's derived from animals. So they don't permit it. And when we finish a cycle or two, they clean everything, and then they do one cycle for kosher. The 80% or 90% of the produce in this factory is the non-kosher. When they run a cycle for kosher, they wash the machines and they run some amount, whatever. So this is how to be careful and not take the liberty to decide, oh, maybe it's part of the Shabbat, I rely on the leniency. It's not only that, it could be in the ingredients. It might say, E something, but it can derive from animals. Okay? You know that most of the red color, it derives from insects. from bugs. Okay, so it has to be the kosher one used artificial. Yeah.
I have a question about, you were saying like a business that's owned by a non-Jew and that are permitted to eat the candy or whatever that was made on Shabbos. So say you have something like a Snickers bar or a Hershey's chocolate bar, it's owned by a non-Jew, you don't know that Hershey's bar was produced on Shabbos.
You don't know, but if you know, it's permitted. I'll give you an example. In Shabbat, you have no bread. No bread to do kiddush, hamotzi. You know that there is a store that sells pita. Okay? Or they're making pita. It was very common, in especially in Arab countries. Okay? They're making pitas all the time. I can go on Shabbat. He knows me, and I'll pay him after Shabbat, and take pita that he just made on Shabbat. Knowing obviously that it's kosher, no problem with the ingredients. It's permitted on Shabbat to do. Nowadays it'll be complicated. You can't just go to a store, you have to pay. They don't have the ability. But in case you can, or let's say it's your neighbor, it's a non-Jew neighbor that make the pita. And when I was a child, it was very common. My grandma had a tabun. You know what the tabun? It's like outside of the house. They put wood, and then they stick on it the bread. We used to eat it all the time. So the Jews prepare themselves after Shabbat, for Shabbat. But the non-Jew, you have to make it fresh. They did it on Shabbat. So if I got stuck, I can go to my non-Jew neighbor and take from him pita on Shabbat. Okay. Let's do one more halacha. A farmer is permitted to hire a non-Jew to feed his cows on Shabbat on the basis of kablanut, offering him a lump sum for his task rather than an hourly or daily salary. The non-Jew may be given the choice to distribute the food, right, with a wheelbarrow or with a tractor. Whichever choice the non-Jew makes is his own. And even if he chooses to operate the tractor on the Jew's farm on Shabbat, it is permitted. This leniency applies only in the land of Israel, where our sages allow for a certain degree of leniency to facilitate the mitzvah of living in the land. Outside the land, a non-Jew may not allow to operate a tractor. I'm sure you didn't know that. Okay? I will ask a question, and we'll deal with that next week. I had a friend, he unfortunately passed away many years ago. We were together in the yeshiva. He went to the army. He was an officer, was a great, great person. He lived in a moshav. The moshav near the airport of Ben Gurion, it's called Tirat Yehuda. My dear friend, his name is Yoshua, Shuki, and Itamar Yoshua. Anyways, his parents have greenhouses for selling flowers, big ones. And there's a problem, you have to cut it on a certain date. If you miss few hours or 24 hours, it will ruin the quality of it. So have you cut it on every day you have to harvest a certain amount. The question is, if they can have the non-Jew employee keep working on Shabbat. They can keep Shabbat in the house. In the backyard, I can have a huge one field. The people working. They're cutting, they're chopping, they're putting it together, refrigerator. Otherwise, they can experience a great loss. Especially their stuff when it was made for export. A very good quality of flowers. So this kind of deals we will talk next week, including a case of a car to be put in a body shop. Can you do it before Shabbat? How close to Shabbat? and all these questions. God bless you all, and bless the land of Israel, and brings Bezat Hashem all the hostages back home safely. And Hashem bless all our soldiers to come back home, all the soldiers and all the security forces in Israel and around the world. May they come home safely. Amen. Thank you.
Amen.